Hi guys, this is Erica from Gokce Capital. Now before I begin, be sure to click subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Anthony Di Nicola has been sued by just about everyone. Anthony is a deer expert tasked with implementing New York City's latest deer management project. For believe it or not, New York City has a deer problem. So how do you manage deer in one of the largest cities in the world? We'll find out at the end of this video. But first, whether you are the owner of hunting land or a resident in an area with a number of deer, you are likely interested in how to manage deer on your property and in your community. So in today's video, we have the top things you should know. Number 1, deer management is the practice and philosophy of wildlife management employed to regulate the population of deer in an area. It's designed to regulate the population size and reduce the negative impacts this population may have on the ecosystem and other wildlife. Number 2, deer management is necessary because without it, a deer population will continue to grow until it reaches the biological carrying capacity of the ecosystem. An area with deer population near the carrying capacity often begins to see plant life disappearing, which in turn will impact other wildlife, but of perhaps greater concern is the deer's impact on humans. For deer can cause car accidents, Lyme disease, crop damage, and property damage. Number 3, there are two main kinds of deer management strategies utilized. They are broken down into lethal and non-lethal methods. Lethal methods are, as the name would suggest, the practice of killing deer in order to reduce the population. Hunting is the most common strategy used, but sometimes large-scale culls are implemented, which are undertaken by either government agencies or contractors. The second kind of deer management strategy involves non-lethal methods. These include chemical repellents and fencing to keep deer away from specific areas, and wildlife birth control to reduce the overall population. Number 4, traditional deer management is the practice where antlered bucks are harvested regardless of age or antler quality. In this practice, few does are harvested. The problem with traditional deer management is that many studies have shown that it fails to keep the herd below the biological carrying capacity of the area. This is because does are rarely culled and thus will keep reproducing at their normal capacity. Number 5, given the issues with traditional deer management, today quality deer management is more often utilized. Quality deer management is the philosophy of managing deer herds in a biologically and socially sound manner within the existing habitat conditions. It does this by looking at the existing deer density, the current sex ratio, or the number of bucks relative to the number of does in an area, the habitat condition, and landowner and community objectives. Quality deer management promotes sound management by improving the age structure and sex ratio, managing the habitat, and keeping detailed records on the deer observed and harvested to ensure that there is a balance between maintaining a healthy deer population and meeting the goals of the overall community. Number 6, having said all this, if you are the owner of hunting land, your primary concern is likely antler growth. Research shows that there are 3 main factors that influence deer antler and body development: age, nutrition, and genetics. One of the most important factors in quality deer management is understanding the age structure within the buck segment of the herd. Bucks tend to reach their maximum skeletal growth at around 4.5 years of age and their peak weight around 6 years of age. You want to make sure that a good segment of the buck population reaches the older age classes. This is why with quality deer management there is such an emphasis on creating a healthy age balance among the deer herd. Furthermore, if you own a smaller parcel of hunting land, it's going to be very important that you work with the adjoining property owners to ensure that all of you are implementing the same strategies. This is because small properties may not be able to contain the home ranges of several bucks, and therefore you will need your neighbors to implement the same quality management strategies to ensure that you get those trophy bucks on a regular basis. The second important factor is nutrition. Antler development is greatly impacted by the available food. Therefore, You'll want to manage the habitat of your property to ensure that there is appropriate protein and forage available for your bucks. Finally, the third factor is genetics. A buck's potential antler development is determined by its genetic traits. There is not too much you can do as a landowner to influence the genetics of your herd, so you should focus on providing adequate nutrition and allowing younger bucks to reach maturity. And number 7. As a landowner, to determine the right deer management strategy for your land, you should implement the following techniques. Collect and record data on the deer on your property. Keep populations at or below the carrying capacity. Look to improve the buck-to-doe sex ratio. As we mentioned earlier, you'll want to improve the age structure. And as you collect and record data, constantly reevaluate your goals and methods. Again, as we mentioned earlier, as a landowner, it's very important that you collaborate with others in your area. Quality deer management in particular really requires the entire community. After all, property boundaries don't mean much to deer. So if different landowners are utilizing different strategies, no one landowner is going to see the kind of success that they are hoping for. But let's return to New York City's deer management program. About 20 years ago, residents of Staten Island began to notice deer returning to the borough for the first time in over 100 years. One deer spotted in a park, another running across the road. But soon, these brief glimpses became more frequent. Suddenly, there were stories of deer breaking store windows, eating expensive landscaping, and more importantly, raising rates of Lyme disease in the borough. Reactions to the deer crossed the spectrum. Many residents were thrilled, feeding the deer bagels and Italian bread, while others saw them as rats with hooves. But regardless of how residents felt about the new arrivals, it soon became clear that the population was growing rapidly, placing stress on the borough's parks and potentially spreading disease. The question, of course, was what to do. And in a city as outspoken as New York, the answer would not be easy. This was when Anthony DiNicola was called in. Anthony DiNicola is a biologist and the owner of White Buffalo, a nonprofit that manages deer populations and uses funds from the management contracts to conduct research into population control methods. White buffalo grew out of DiNicola's PhD research on using contraception as a way to control deer populations, which is precisely why he was selected for New York City's deer management program. Typical deer management programs rely on hunters or lethal methods, but as you can imagine, many people aren't thrilled with the idea of hunters in their backyard. And stories like this one do not help much. So New York City decided to try a controversial method. DiNicola and White Buffalo would catch and neuter all of the male deer. Contraception is an increasingly popular way to manage deer in suburban environments, largely because of the uproar lethal culling campaigns create. But it is usually the female deer that are sterilized, even though spaying females is more expensive than neutering males. This is because every buck must be sterilized for the program to work, a near impossible task unless you are surrounded by a moat. Fortunately, Staten Island is the perfect environment for a male neuter campaign, and so Dr. DiNicola's team got to work, sending out strike teams armed with dart guns to take down deer around set bait traps, after which the team's veterinarian would quickly run over, perform the simple operation, and tag the buck. A task that is still far more complicated than either culling the herds or letting them be. Still, data from the first few years of the experiment seems to suggest that the operations work, but not everyone is happy. Some say the cost of the program is ridiculous. Others that the sterilization program is inhumane given the stress it puts on the animals. But either way, it's a fascinating case study in how we interact with animals and the difference between the number of individuals an area can support versus the number of animals a human community will tolerate. Now, do you have any stories on deer management? Let us know in the comments. Did you like this video? You're going to love our Gokce Land Due Diligence program. We'll make you a land due diligence expert in just 7 days. Check it out at gokcecapital.com/glad. And while you're at our website, don't forget to explore our $1 down listings at gokcecapital.com/listings. Finally, don't hesitate to reach out. You can email, call, or text, and we will respond as soon as possible. So thank you for listening, and more to come.